he infers from that that our reason, our rationality, has no share in what Plato or Aristotle would have called the divine nous, the divine intelligence. Our reason has within it no spark of divinity. Our reason does not testify to some kind of inner voice of conscience or anything that would purport to give it some kind of indubitable foundation. Such certainty as we have about anything is for Hobbes always provisional, discovered on the basis of experience and subject to continual revision in the light of further experience. And that, again, experiential conception of knowledge, that kind of skepticism about the foundations of knowledge, has further implications for Hobbes's views on such things as religion and religious toleration. There are no signs or fruit of religion, he says, but in man only, says in chapter 12. That is to say, the causes of religion can be traced back and are rooted in the restlessness of the human mind, in its search for causes. And it is because, he says, we are born ignorant of causes, we are ignorant of the causes of things, that we are led to search out beginnings and origins. And this leads us, ultimately, he says, to posit the existence of God, who is, so to speak, the first cause of all things. Hobbes does not, despite this kind of rationalistic view of religion and his view that religion has its origin, again, in the restlessness and of the human mind, Hobbes doesn't deny the possibility of revelation or some kind of direct communication of God to us. But what he does deny is that anyone who has claimed to receive such a revelation, he denies that any such person has the right to impose that view on anyone else, because nobody else can correctly have the means to verify a person's claim to revelation. No one can impose their claim of revealed knowledge on another. Does this make Hobbes an atheist, as many would have maintained in his day? No. It makes him a skeptic about the revealed religion. So it is because of this individualism and skepticism, a view of life as willing and choosing, that there are in the state of nature, so to speak, no standards to adjudicate conflicts, that the central issue of politics arises, namely, what makes authority possible? How are people who are biologically, individually constituted, so to speak, how can any of us ever be capable of obeying common rules or having moral obligations to one another? How is that possible? Hobbes continues to ask, in a manner of speaking, on almost every page of the book. But before answering that question, consider a little further Hobbes's account of the state of nature and what makes it seem like a plausible starting point to answer the question of what makes authority possible. To say that the state of nature consists primarily of individuals with, again, diverse likes, dislikes, beliefs, opinions, and the like, is not to say that the state of nature is a state of isolation, as it's sometimes attributed to him. People in the state of nature may have regular and continual contact with one another. It is just that their relations are unregulated. They are unregulated by law. They are unregulated by authority. The state of nature is simply a kind of condition of maximum insecurity, an unregulated market with no common laws or rules to sustain it. The emphasis on the individual is just another way of saying, again, unlike Aristotle, that no one has natural authority over anyone else. Relations of authority exist only by, so to speak, the consent or the will of the governed. And the fact that relations in the state of nature are unregulated, for him makes it is synonymous with making it a condition of war of all against all in his famous formulation. Now, you might look at that formulation, the state of war is one of all against all, and you might say that such a condition of civil war, of maximum insecurity, of the total breakdown of condition of rules and laws is, if anything, the state of the exception. How often does that really occur in our experience in human life? But Hobbes, like Machiavelli, as we saw, likes to take the exceptional situation and turn it into the norm. It becomes the normal condition, state of security, insecurity, fear, conflict, and the like. This is not to say, again, that the state of nature for Hobbes is one of permanent fighting, but it is one of permanent fear and distrust. And he asks his readers, I mean, there are so many wonderful passages in this book. This just happens to be one of my particular favorites. He asks his readers, if you don't believe me, again, think of his skepticism. Don't believe me, he says, check your own experience and see if I'm not right. And this is what he writes. Let him, the reader, therefore ask himself, Hobbes writes, when taking a journey, he arms himself and seeks to go well accompanied. When going to sleep, he locks his doors, even when in his house. And even when in his house, he locks his chests. And this when he knows, he says, there be laws and public officers armed to avenge all injuries shall be done to him. What opinion, Hobbes asks, he has of his fellow subjects when he rides armed? Now, what does that say about your thinking about your fellow citizens when you arm yourselves going for a trip? Of his fellow citizens when he locks his doors at night? Or of his children and servants when he locks his chests? Does he not therefore as much accuse mankind by his action as I do by my words? You can see the mischievousness of Hobbes in that, in that delightful passage. What about you, he says? And this is not in some kind of state of nature. This is in a completely, fully functioning society. When you go armed, when you lock your doors, when you lock your chests at night, don't you don't your actions and your experience simply confirm what I'm saying? And this tells us another thing about the state of nature, which it is easy to forget. The state of nature, at least for Hobbes, is not some kind of primitive anthropological datum that we find by going back in time somehow. Rousseau will speak about it more this way. For Hobbes, the state of nature exists, he says, whenever authority is not enforced. The state of nature fully continues in many ways, oddly, even in civil society, he says, whenever we have reason to believe that our lives or our properties or ourselves are not secure. And so in fact, we can never be fully free of the fear and of the anxiety and uncertainty of the state of nature, even within, to some degree, a fully constituted civil society. The only exception to this, of course, in Hobbes's account of the state of nature, when he says, don't you lock your doors at night, are, of course, Yale students living here on campus who are so trusting that they never lock their doors at night in their entryways and so on, and then, of course, are always stunned to find when something is stolen from them. How could this be? How could this be? And I tell them, lock your doors, but they still don't believe me. Maybe you'll now believe Hobbes if you don't believe me. So the state of nature, it's a state of insecurity, it's a state of conflict. How do we get out of it? This is, of course, the huge issue that Hobbes asks for the rest of, for much of the book. What do we do to get out of this state of nature, to enter a condition of civil society and civilized life? How do I give up my right to do whatever is in my power to secure my person or my possessions when I have no expectation, you might say, that others around me are prepared to do so as well. This is a sort of a classic example of what economists and other people like them call the prisoner's dilemma. You know, why should I act in such a way if I have no expectation or reasonable expectation that those around me will reciprocate? Hobbes's members of a state of nature seem to be in a classic prisoner's dilemma problem. Maybe we could say, or Hobbes could say, that laying down our right to do all things in seeking peace with others is the rational thing to do in the condition of nature. We are all rational actors, and therefore it is rational for us to seek and to desire peace. But note that that is exactly what Hobbes does not say. He does not say this. Far from having a sort of a rational actor model of politics, he operates with an irrational actor model. He assumes that it is not reason, but our passions that are the dominant force of human psychology, our desires, our aversions, our passions. And although I've said that Hobbes has emphasized the diversity of our passions, there are still two main passions that he feels universally dominate human nature. And these two passions are pride and fear. Pride and fear, these are the Hobbesian equivalents of the two great, what Machiavelli called humors, you remember, the two humors of the two great social classes, the desires